Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And today I'm going to be making some pixel art scenes based on Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi. I recently created a few Luke Skywalker sprites in a Game Boy Color style, so I want to continue that work into some game mockups that follow a top-down style along the lines of the Pokemon and the Legend of Zelda games for the Game Boy Color. And we'll talk about some of those stylistic elements along the way as well. So let's get right into it. I figured I'd cherry pick a few scenes that are spread out throughout the movie, so we're starting here with an early scene at Jabba's palace. Since this is going to be in a Game Boy Color style, I'm using a canvas size of 160 by 144 pixels. And I've set up my grid overlay to be units of 8 by 8 pixels, since that's the base tile size used for that system. And that tile grid comes in handy because it's going to direct a lot of the way that I'm building the room layout here. Since you can use it to guide where you want to place the walls and the floor space by basically just rounding things off to full tile units. What I like about working on a grid is that when you're finished with the piece, I think you can kind of feel the underlying tidiness that results from having been adhered to a grid like this. But beyond that, it's one of the technical specifications of the hardware, so for me trying to emulate this style, it should end up being kind of a more authentic look as well. The other important factor when considering the technical side of things for a Game Boy Color piece is, of course, the color palette. Now, the Game Boy Color is capable of displaying or differentiating around 32,000 unique colors. However, it's only capable of displaying up to 56 different colors on screen at any one time. And furthermore, and this is the part that gets a little bit tricky, those 56 colors aren't just a free-for-all to be used anywhere at any time. This actually breaks down as being 8 individual sub-palettes of 4 colors each, and those are used for background tile work, kind of like for the floors and the walls and stuff like that. And then there's 8 individual sub-palettes of 3 colors each, plus a transparency, and those are used for sprites, like the characters and the items, etc. The original Game Boy, of course, only uses 4 colors total. So in a way, on a per tile basis, you're still getting a similar feel of that 4-color limit that lends that element of recognizability as a Game Boy style. But the fact that you can have these several different combinations of unique 4-color groupings is kind of what really elevates this overall look. While making this piece, I was trying to mentally keep track of these palette combinations, which for a lot of the background work was pretty easy because I just had to make sure I didn't use any more than 4 colors per tile. But beyond that, I wanted to make sure I wasn't creating too many unique combinations of 4 colors. But for the most part, this was just a few different shades of these sandy beige colors and stuff like that, so I don't think it really got to being that many. And then when it came to the sprite work, I'd be limited to the 3 color combos, kind of with that final color slot being for the transparency. Prior to starting this work, I put together a little 32 color starter palette so I'd have something to choose from. And it gave me a way to limit my options ahead of time so there could be a lot of cohesion not only within this singular piece, but hopefully across all the ones I'll be making today. These colors were selected to provide a few different steps of brightness across several hues. And like I said, it's just a place to start from, so I kind of continued to edit colors and make substitutions as I went along, after actually seeing them in action and judging what was looking good and what wasn't. Anyway, for the actual content of the scene itself, you can see that I've collected several reference images because I was trying to get a sense of the layout of Jabba's throne room. But in the end, I decided to simplify a few things. For example, I put the Han Solo in carbonite on display in a different spot than would be accurate to the film. But this was actually just so he'd be easily visible within this particular orientation of the room. And in finishing up here, I wanted to fill out a player HUD. And I figured for this part it makes sense that you'd have been playing as R2-D2 and C-3PO, delivering Luke's hologram message. So I've populated the HUD with some abilities and some styling related to those two. And that'll basically finish things out, so let's go ahead and take a look at the final artwork for Jabba's throne room. Alright, with the speeder bike scene, one of the challenges is to capture some look of a forest, but then in the interest of creating a short looping animation for this, there should also be enough space for the bikes to travel within, as if it's kind of like a racetrack or something. So I'm starting here with some basic tiling for where the pathway is going to go, and then I'll surround the rest with some trees and stuff. And I came out of the gate a little hot with this one. I was going so far as to create this little 3x3 tile set for the interface between the grass and the pathway tiling, which was a fun exercise, but ultimately didn't really end up being any kind of incredible time saver for this one. I think it's just one of those like pixel artisty kind of things to make tile sets and stuff and thinking that way. But I was trying to keep things in the spirit of this technical stuff too, so there was that. What was incredibly useful though was to make some tiling for a tree that could then go on to populate the rest of the map and create the forest. So I'm making this in a bubbly style, kind of like that of The Legend of Zelda. So it's not exactly a giant redwood tree, but it should be easier to work with as a scrolling component and kind of fits the bill for the stylization here. In keeping with that 4-color limit on tiling, you can see that the tree trunk and the upper leaves are intentionally placed on different tiles, meaning they'll be using different 4-color combos. Actually, at a certain point, I got carried away and accidentally added an extra color into the trunk, which brought the color count up to 5 colors for some of these tiles. Sometimes you just kind of get lost in different aspects and sort of overlook things, so there's a couple errors like that, but I tried to keep it under wraps. Now that we've got that singular tree, we can use it to populate the forest. One option would be to create a sort of interlocking tile pattern for a really dense looking forest, which isn't a bad look at all, but it felt a little treetop heavy and not enough trunk. So another option would be a very linear repetition of trees on either side. And while each tree obviously has really nice readability with this format, it does look a bit too spacious for this to believably be a forest. So eventually, as you can imagine, I sort of took an approach between these two ideas and populated the area with clusters of trees. Sometimes using groups of 4, sometimes just a couple. And this looked quite a bit more natural. And then with these emptier spaces created by that clustering, I filled in some foliage and pattern work to kind of keep things more interesting than just being trees. To create the speeder sprite, I took an indoor Luke sprite that I had made in my earlier video and reworked it to be facing upward. Then I started to draw the bike details underneath. In this case, I'm picturing the speeder bike to be its own individual sprite with its own 3-color palette separate from that of the Luke sprite. And then the two of those would be sort of stacked and translated along together. Once again, I'm using the 8x8 grid to guide the speeder design, making sure it's occupying kind of a reasonably efficient area that's also some multiple of the tile dimension itself. Now, to give this a scrolling movement, I'm going to double the forest area and make it repeat. So first I'm going to double my canvas height from 144 to 288 pixels. Next, I'm going to copy all the trees up into that new space. And we can see that they don't line up seamlessly with those below, which I was kind of expecting just based on the random clustering I did earlier, but that can be adjusted later. From here, I drew in a slightly different pathway because I wanted to feel like there was a bit more than just one screen's worth of design to it. So just as a rough prototype, we can kind of imagine here that the final animation will be the style where the bikes stay relatively in place, maybe bobbing around a little bit, and the whole strip of the map is going to move through the original canvas, kind of like this. Now, this is my cooking channel moment here because I'm jumping ahead to show you the completed map design for that full strip, including the upper area that we just added. And this entire thing repeats nicely every 288 pixels, which I can show you now by just duplicating the whole map and joining it together again at the center here. To make this entire strip scroll in the animation, I'm using a quick method of tweening the Photoshop frame timeline. So basically, I just need my start and end points, and it'll create all the in-between frames automatically. I've got the first frame at the original position, and the final frame will be where the map has scrolled all the way down through its entire height of 288 pixels. So right now they actually both kind of look the same, but the seamless layer is entirely offset by that full height on the end frame. Next, I highlight them both and then select the tween option. And in this example, I'm going to add 143 frames. And this is going to result in a scroll of 2 pixels per frame to ensure that it meets back at the starting position again. At this point, my end frame has fulfilled its purpose of defining the final position. So I delete it and I'm left with 144 frames that scroll at 2 pixels each to meet back by the time the loop is complete. At this frame rate, you can see it's quite slow. They're actually just kind of taking a friendly jaunt together. But I'm gonna take this and then speed up the footage for the final animation. The fact that all these frame positions exist is gonna help the final animation appear much smoother when it's eventually sped up, compared to if I just made this jump in larger pixel increments. The final touch here is a quick update to the HUD, and this is pretty much ready to go. So let's go take a look at the final speeder bike animation. Alright, the final piece of course needed to involve a lightsaber duel, and this scene felt like it translated really nicely into kind of a gamified version of Luke battling Vader in this boss room with the Emperor looking on from his throne and everything. Once again, just like with Jabba's throne room, this involves simplifying what can be seen in the movie, at least when trying to fit enough of the room into a single screenshot layout that still leaves a believable play area. For this one, I made a little thumbnail sketch on a post-it note to try to find that layout. So here I've just been translating that into this pixel version, using the grid to find a good balance to everything. Something that made this one quite efficient was that I really leaned into the symmetry of the room. I think it's pretty much how it is in the film, and it seems like kind of an imposing layout for this setting too. So in my case, everything kind of centers around the Emperor's position along the center line of the screen. And the sprite work for him and the throne were worked out sort of around those middle tiles of the screen. One of the trickier components to that was the iconic sort of spiderweb frame design for the window behind him. And I created this by laying down vertical and horizontal guides around a center circle. And then for all the in-between arcs, I used different pencil sizes to drop these large circle shapes, which I then erased from to create all the isolated bits of framework. It's by no means a one-for-one of all the same arcs, in the screenshots and that. But with some color and highlights, it turned out to be quite a nice approximation. In a way, that idea of approximation actually kind of sums up this whole project. By that, I mean like this combination of the Game Boy Color resolution, the color restrictions, the top-down Pokemon Zelda sort of style. All of that is about finding a way to translate this source material into this other context. And I think I mentioned this in my Skywalker Sprite video, but the low resolution work here is something that I find really satisfying to work on, because there's this element of problem solving to it, especially when bringing in some of the technical parameters like the Game Boy Color stuff. That being said, for this piece in particular, I actually don't recall spending as much time being concerned with the color counts and the palettes and all that. So it's either that I got more proficient with that as I went on, or it's more likely that I actually kind of lost track of that and just had fun getting lost in this one. But either way, it ends up feeling consistent with the others, I think, so hopefully that's actually just the case. On top of just the overall styling, one of the things I wanted to try for this series of pieces was just to do like these slight touches of animation. Sometimes I've done more involved kind of like simulated gameplay with characters walking around and stuff, but for these I wanted them to be more like living screenshots kind of in a way. So I guess the speeder bikes was maybe a bit more elaborate, I suppose, but for the Jabba scene, most characters were just on these bouncy like 2-frame loops, just to give them that slight touch of life, compared to if it was just a static screenshot. For this scene, I already had several lightsaber slash poses worked out for the Luke sprite, so I copied those over and flipped them, and then basically just painted a Vader appearance over top of them. So the animation idea for this one is that they can just sort of trade these slashes back and forth, and it's a pretty quick and efficient loopable animation that provides a nice amount of action to it as well. And once again, I'm updating the HUD, and Luke has leveled up some more at this point, so he's got another ability, a force pull in this case. And then, some more money, some more health as well. But let's go ahead and take a look at the final artwork for this final piece, the lightsaber duel. All right, and here are all three of those together, which provides kind of a nice overview of what this sort of game could be. I think it looks pretty fun, and I'm sorry that it's not real. Feel free to let me know what other sort of scenes across the entirety of Star Wars you think would be fun to see in this style as well, though. We'll go ahead and close out now with a very rare triple CRT time. So thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.